So, a long time ago, probably the second or third video, I had to decide how wide to make the frame. And it's a function of how sharp I wanted the wheels to be able to turn. And it was a guess. I've never done one of these before. And at the time I was thinking, I don't want it to turn too sharp because I don't want the kids to be going fast and take a hard turn and something bad happens. So, right now I'm kind of limited. The turning radius, well, it's hitting the control rod, but not much past that is the frame. So it's terrible to drive. It doesn't turn sharp enough. You can't even turn it around in a street without going in somebody's driveway or in their yard. So I need to make it turn sharper. I got three things I'm going to do. One, I'm going to cut these axles off and put a longer one. I'm going to go a ½ inch longer. I don't want to go too much farther because I don't want the wheels to like look stupid, but I think a ½ inch longer, push them out farther. That will allow it to turn sharper before it hits anything. So that's going to be the first thing I'm going to do. And then this control rod, it's important. It keeps the front axle from getting all bent up. I'm going to put it under the bottom. I think I can still get my strength if I move it. Just, I don't know if you can see it. It's right here, the wheels hit it. If I take that off and reconfigure it so it goes up underneath the frame, up under here, that will give it a little more turn. Now if that doesn't do it, I'm going to cut a hole in the side of the body for the wheel to go up in. And that's going to be kind of drastic because I'll have to cut this frame and redo it. But I'm going to make it turn sharper one way or the other. And then the last thing I'm going to do is the steering wheel turns a ½ turn lock to lock. And that one doesn't give you much leverage when the car's loaded down with kids. You got to turn pretty hard. It's going to be hard for a little one to turn. And two, when you're going really fast, it's really sensitive because just a little bit of the wheel makes a big turn. So I'm going to try to solve that by using, I'm going to put this rack and pinion steering in there. So this front end stuff is new to me. I wasn't really sure how to do this, but I think I got a good plan. I propped the buggy up on the table and it's kind of stable. And then I took an angle iron and clamped it to the existing axle and then welded 2 pieces of steel to it so it won't move. So that's locating the axle where it is. I did another one on this side, and now I'm going to cut the axle off and I'll lay the new axle right in this angle, and hopefully I can retain the steering geometry I have because it's working pretty good. I just want it to stick out a little farther. So this is my new axle I'm going to cut out of this piece. This was an axle from a welding cart. It's the right diameter and it has threaded ends, which I like better. I never was too crazy about those pieces of wire holding the front wheels on. So the 2 new axles are in place and they have enough weld on them where they won't move. Now I need to cut my little templates out the way so I can get to the axles, and I need to get a real live weld on that axle stub. Since this axle weld was kind of critical, I took the spindle off and brought it over to the workbench so I can weld downhill all the way around. And I got like 3 passes on it, and it's not really pretty, but it's a lot of weld. It ain't coming off. Now I need to move this control arm out of the way. And it's important because it's really the only thing that keeps the axle from, like if you were to hit a curb on this end, it would want to rip off the car. And the only thing holding it would be these 4 little bolts, and you'd have a lot of leverage to make it do bad things. So I gotta have them. I guess the next most likely spot would be to put them directly under this frame, but then if I end up notching the frame to get the wheels to turn even sharper, I'm gonna have to move them again. So I'm gonna put them right here. In the back I can weld something across from frame to frame, that's no problem. In the front I gotta drop down because I gotta get underneath this. So I think I'm going to weld a flat piece down, and then we'll put the flat bar and we'll put the pivot back there somewhere. Change of plans. Instead of putting the steel this way, I'm going to rotate it this way, and then I can add one of these. I bought 4 of these first go around. I only ended up using 2, so I have 2 extras. So this is a pivot that'll make it work even better. So, and it'll look less obtrusive from the front because you'll see the edge instead of a big flat piece of steel. So, I'll weld these on, bolt this on, unbolt the other ones, get the length right, and see what kind of bracket I need to put to hold the back end. Good stuff. Okay, brackets welded, swivels bolted, found the right size bolt and nut and lock washer and everything. So now I'm going to cut the old one free. It's welded up here, but I think I can get my grinder in there. It's welded in the front. The back is bolted. Little irritation to get this bolt out, which I need because it fits the swivel. I got to take the running board off. Take the running board off, I got to take the fender off. So I took the old control arm after I cut it off, and I bent a dog leg in it and cut the end off, cut that welded blob off, and I'm going to weld it to here. You see that? Yeah, I'm going to weld it here, and then I just have to put an arm between this bolt and put that bolt back in. I'll be set. Easy smeezy. Alright, I got the 2 brackets clamped in place with the vice grips. Got one over there, one over there. Did some measuring. They're both the same distance from the front, and they're both the same distance down from the deck. So I'm going to attempt to get underneath here and weld upside down. It's going to be ugly. It's not as critical a weld as these axles, so it'll be alright. This is a setup to weld the correct threaded end onto the little control rod. I got them the right length. I just need to weld a end on each end and keep them halfway straight, and that's why I use that angle iron. So everything turned out copacetic. Everything's lovely. It fit up well, and I attribute that largely to proper tongue position. You just can't overemphasize how important tongue position is when you're doing a job like this. I have the wheels on with suitable spacers, and I got some more adjustment. I can turn the wheels sharper than I used to on both sides. The adjustment is under the dash. It's going to be a little tight squeeze, but we're going to there and get as much as we can. Going back up, I wanted to paint that stuff under there before I set it down. Well, the wheels have to come back off because I have to cut this hole more that way and more this way. Because now that the thing turns sharper, it can't turn because it hits on here. So I have to get the little grinder and start grinding. So as of right now, the steering is 200% better. It's not right yet. I got a bunch of slack underneath the dashboard and that chain that used to be tight, so I don't know what's going on with that. I'm just kind of scared to drive it because if the chain falls off, you got naught for steering. But we made progress. We got a better gear ratio in the back, and we got a sharper turning radius in the front, and that'll only get better when I pull the front grille so I can fully adjust the stops and put this worm drive steering in there. It's gonna be better. A lot of work. So when I was under here trying to adjust the stops, I noticed all this slack in the steering chain, and this shouldn't be. This was I thought metal on metal, so I gotta address this. I can't let this go. This could be terrible. Something goes wrong with this. Even though I'm not ready to put the rack and pinion steering in, I'm gonna go ahead and take the front end apart and get to this and see what's going on. So when I filmed this, I still had to remove the front axle to remove the grill. After this, I did a bunch of butchering on the fiberglass, and now I can get the grill off without removing the front axle. which is much nicer. It's the way I should have gone from the get-go. So I got the problem right here. The bearing fell out. There was a bearing here and it's gone. So the problem was obvious. The bearing fell out. I don't know why the bearing fell out unless I never had it tight to begin with, or this bolt vibrated loose. So I found the bearing. It was down in there. So I put it back and I put a longer bolt where I could put a extra. This is threaded, so I threaded it in here, got it tight, and then I put an additional locking nut on the back side. So I don't think that's going to come loose. And I have one of these left over, so I'm going to go ahead and put this on here, even though it's kind of boogered up, and tighten that up. So that should give me a, it shouldn't come off again. And I'm going to renovate my grill where I can put it on after the axle's on, because it's a pain to take the axle off every time I need to do something in there. This is my stop to keep the front wheel from turning too far and hitting the frame, and it works great, but it's impossible to get to with the front of the cart on. So I'm going to take this off and try to weld a nut here, because there's a backing nut that you can't get the wrench on. I'm going to try to weld a nut here and replace this stud with just a bolt and maybe a locking nut that I can easily get to when I put the front of the car back on. I'm going to a lot of trouble here to make this thing work properly, knowing that I'm going to take it all out when I put the rack and pinion steering in. But I've made a couple of changes to the steering, and if I continue to make changes to the steering and don't check it and things don't work, I won't know where to look for the problem. So I'm going back with the existing steering chain and the lever arm, and then I'll test it with the longer axle and a shorter turning radius. And if it all works fine, then I'll take all this off and I'll put the rack in. And then if I have a problem, I'll know it's related to the rack. Okay, so I got the rack and I found a hub that'll fit it. I had to grind the splines off and just slip it over there. It will have to be welded, unfortunately. And I can either put it in there this ways or this ways, but I can't put it this ways because that makes the steering backwards. This makes the steering backwards, so I got to have the sprocket on top, either that way or that way. So it's time to put up or shut up. I got to take all this stuff out and see what we can do. Everything that would unbolt is unbolted, so I'm gonna have to cut this now with a grinder and get this off. Okay, if I put the big sprocket on here, this is going to have to be moved forward some to line up with the sprocket that's up there. But I'm going to have a problem by moving it too far forward. I need to push it back as far as I can. So I'm going to take this apart, and I think there's a spacer, and I think I can flip this sprocket over backwards and get it back about 1 inch without doing any major changes, just by taking it apart and flopping it around. So this is the front half of my upper steering shaft, and my goal is to get the sprocket back this way toward my right hand, and I got it welded, but I can cut the weld. So I think if I turn the sprocket around and maybe do away with this spacer, I can get probably over 1 inch. That's a big deal. So let me cut it apart and get it loose, and we'll turn it around. So with the sprocket turned around, it was going to hit, the chain was going to hit the bolts. So I had to put a washer, and that's as far back as I can go without the chain hitting the bolts. I guess if it comes down to it, I could weld this little bearing housing and don't use the bolts, but I think I'm going to be all right. I think this is going to give me enough room right here. Upper steering shaft is back in place and back together. The only difference is I've turned this sprocket around from this way to this way, and I have a good bit of adjustment to get it to line up with the bottom, and then I can weld it in place. Now I need my big sprocket. I'm going to have to cut it loose because I had it welded to this steel sheave. Shouldn't be a problem. I'm going to cut it loose. Okay, with the cart sitting fairly level, and with this sprocket pushed as far back as it'll go, I have roughly 7/8 of an inch behind this main square tube in the center of the chain. So then if I take the big sprocket and weld it to the back of this sprocket, put this contraption in there like so, I think everything's going to work out. I think it'll fit. I think it's going to be a little bit farther forward than the last tie rod thing sticking out, but I don't think it's going to be so much farther forward that it's going to hurt anything. So I got direction now. I need to get this big sprocket welded, centered on this sprocket. Since I knew that I wanted to get the whole deal as far back as I could to clear it out of the way of the grill and everything, I went ahead and slid the sprocket on the shaft as far as it would go without hitting these little nuts down there, and I put a little tack weld on it. So may come back later and weld it all up if everything fits. So let's say 6.5 out to out, 8 inch, 9 inches tall, 6.5 by 9. Got to make a little frame. The support frame is in place. 2 carriage bolts. I use carriage bolts because that plywood front is flat here, so I didn't want it to stick out too far. Now I need to anchor this to the frame, and it has to be able to go up and down to adjust the chain, and it can't rotate because the chain is going to want to twist this around. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to weld onto this thing. I don't know any other way. I don't think clamps are going to do it. So let me take it back. Let me take this back off and bring it over to the workbench and see what we can rig up. Okay, I'm going to start off with this piece of channel. I'm going to make these 4 cuts, and we'll go from there. So I've had in mind putting slots in this part for this to go up and down, because I'll need to adjust the chain. It won't be a perfect link. I'll have to adjust it. But fastening it is a problem because there's not much room back there. I can get a nut, but not a nut and a flat washer. And then when you make a slot, you really need a flat washer. So now I'm thinking about making this permanent, welding this to this, the frame, and slotting the big hole at the bottom so the whole frame can go up and down. Because I think this is just going to be trouble. I'm not going to be able to adequately put a sliding fastener back there that can't really, there's no room for a lock washer. Yeah, I'm going to change my plan. I'm going to take this back off and slot the big frame that I made. So I've slotted the 2 holes that bolt this main frame to the chassis of the cart. And then I put these little ears because whenever you have a slotted hole, you have the possibility of something slipping. So this will bolt it down to the bottom of the chassis to keep it from slipping up. And I painted the bottom part, and I'm going to put it in, and it possibly, not probably, but possibly be the last time I put this in there if it works. Okay, so that's as low as it can ever go. I'm just going to pick this up a little bit and put me a weld on here on both sides, and then I'll try to fit the chain and see how it works. Alright, got it together and it all seems to work well. I did do one screw up before I welded this, which keeps me from removing the chain wheel. I should have drilled for those bolts down there, but I can drill from the bottom. It'd just be kind of tricky to get it right. But this is awesome. It's hard to say precisely because I don't have the rest of the front end on, but it looks like I'm going to be almost 2 turns lock to lock instead of a half a turn lock to lock, which it was before. So it's smooth. Happy old man right now. So I took one of my old tie rods and cut it in half, or a little bit less than a half, and I put it in here. But put one on both sides, and I think we're looking pretty good. It'll turn this way until the tire almost hits the side. Could turn a little bit more, but I'll run out of stroke. And the same this way. Turns till the tire almost hits the side. I could get more stroke if I moved this hole further in. And I may have to do that depending on, I'm gonna put it on the ground and put some weight on it and try to line up the front wheels. I had to use my DeWalt engine lathe to ream out the end of the tie rod to fit the threaded stud that stuck out of the rack and pinion that I bought. So I did end up drilling another hole to get me some more range of motion, which made my tie rods too short, but luckily I had the other one to cut in half, so I think I have them right now. And I'm getting ready to start the welder and put a very small tack between the pipe and this nut on both sides, and between the sprocket and the shaft. And then I'll put a straight edge out from the wheels and try to get somewhat of a front end alignment, and then we'll start up and ride it around, see what it does. Pretty stoked. I'm still trying to make steering improvements, and there's still a little play in these U-joints, even though I swapped one of them out. So I bought this go-kart steering assembly, and there's absolutely no play in them, but at first glance it looks like it's too long, but I think I can cut it down. It's got like a little slip joint in there. I don't need that. I think I can cut it down and weld it, make it shorter, and maybe we can make it fit. Okay, I removed this much spline and this much tube, and I'm past the spline on the inside, so now it's just round. If I weld that together, I think we're going to be in the ballpark. Put a quick weld right here, and I think we're going to make this work. So we got the new U-joint welded together, and I guess theoretically I could have made it even shorter than that, but I think I'm short enough now. Took the stop collar off so I can slide this bearing housing. Okay, so now I just need to weld this to this, cut this off and weld this to this as tight as I can get it. So I got the U-joint, new U-joint welded to the steering shaft, and it is approximately where it was before. This has a little bit of adjustment. The 2 U-joints are welded together, and the front part of the steering shaft, it slides right in the hole. That was luck. And I have this black mark is where the this black tube was before I started, and this black mark is where this flange was, so this is where it needs to be. Now the new one is set up so you can divot the shaft a little bit, and this bolt goes through there and will keep the shaft from turning because it's an interference fit. That'll be fine and dandy if I can get it to fit right where it tightens up and doesn't move. If it moves, I'm no better off than I was before. I'm going to try it, and if I get it right, good for me. If not, I'll drill a hole straight through the middle and put a bolt through the middle like I used to have. That joint was tight. So my first try, I cut it way too deep and it was real sloppy. Second try, I think I got something. I just barely cut it, and the bolt will barely fit in there. It almost feels like it's cross-threading, but it goes in. It's going in, I think. tight no matter what. I think it's cross threading, but it's going in so tight that I'm gonna try it and see if I can't make that work. Got the chain back on, everything's snugged up, went for a ride, and it is better. I don't know how to set the toe in. I have some on 6 feet. I have about 1 inch. I'm not sure whether that's right or not. Definitely have come a long way on the steering. Now I have a shock absorber ordered, a damper, and that hopefully will be the last piece of the puzzle. After that, I'm just going to drive. Yesterday we had a major cleanup at the shop. I'm kind of a pig when I'm in the middle of a project. I brought the bike home, so we cleaned up, and yesterday in the mail, the last part of the cart, I think, came. It's a steering damper. Looks like I might be missing a part, but I'm gonna work on that this morning. And the hospital's ready for the children, so they're going in my truck, and we'll mount those today. So a big day today. Could finish the cart and let the kids be mounted in public. And it's a beautiful, sunny, cool day. This thing might be too lightweight to do any good, but I got it, so I'm going to put it on. And it has a little more than a 2.5 inch stroke. So I used some CAD over here, some cardboard aided design. And from lock to lock, I can measure, if I put the pivot here and the rigid point right there, it goes from a little less than 7.5 to a little over 5. So it's a little, if I build it just like this, it'll be within the range of that little shock. So it won't hurt anything. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna have to weld a little arm here. There's nowhere it'll fit in the back. I'm gonna weld a brace to the frame, and we'll give it a shot. So I've got the steering arm in the vise, and I've got the little metal part, and I got it marked. So I'm gonna clean off the paint, put this on here, and put it right back on the car. So to make this end work, I need a vertical plate. Need it about 1.5 inches tall, and I'm gonna have to round the corners over so it'll fit this pretty little brass thing. I'm gonna go make that 1.5 inches. So my steering upgrade is pretty much a wrap. The little shock, I think it helped. Everything helped. I'm gonna actually buy another one and put it on the other wheel. I think what this shock is doing is compensating for all the slop I have from not having a machine shop and just making do with parts that fit pretty good. So I'm going to put one on the other side. I think that'll be an improvement. It still gets kind of weird when you're going really fast, and I don't know how fast I'm going. I might even be going 30. So after I put the other shock, I will limit the throttle and take care of that high speed issue. We just won't go that fast. But other than that, it drives great. It's comfortable. Motor's running great.
Doing a few test runs here with Molly, looking at the phone speedometer, and Colin agrees with me. 15 miles an hour is really comfortable, even on sort of a bumpy street. If the street's smooth, maybe 18, 19 miles an hour, and he's headed up to almost 30, but it's just not comfortable. You really don't feel secure going that fast. So we're We're going to call this a wrap, and I promise no more videos on the mini car.